Ron Howard has spent his entire life inside Hollywood. He grew up on film sets, surrounded by cameras, lights, and legendary actors. From the outside, it looked like a magical world full of glamour and dreams. To millions of people, Hollywood was the place where heroes were born and happy endings were created. But for Howard, the truth was very different. As a child actor, and later as a respected director, he saw both sides of the entertainment industry. He saw the smiles in front of the cameras and the cold silence behind them. Over the years, he learned that the golden age of Hollywood was not as bright as people believed. Behind the beautiful images and famous faces, there were stories of cruelty, power, and fear that most audiences never imagined. Howard always carried himself as a calm and thoughtful man. He believed in kindness, fairness, and respect. That is why the darker side of Hollywood disturbed him so deeply. While many people only remembered the classic movies and beloved stars, Howard remembered something else. He remembered how some of those same stars behaved when the camera stopped rolling. He remembered the shouting on sets, the broken promises, and the way powerful people treated those beneath them. To him, Hollywood was not just a dream factory, it was also a place where fame could protect almost any kind of behavior. As the years passed, Howard became more open about what he had witnessed. In interviews, he spoke carefully, choosing his words with respect, but he never denied the truth. He admitted that many legends he admired as a young man turned out to be very different in real life. The industry that raised him was built on silence, problems were hidden, victims were ignored, and bad behavior was often rewarded instead of punished. Howard came to believe that too many people confused talent with goodness. Just because someone was a great actor did not mean they were a great person. Now, as an older and wiser filmmaker, Ron Howard feels ready to talk about what he learned. He no longer sees Hollywood through the eyes of a child. He sees it as a man who understands how power works. He knows that the stories audiences love are often very different from the stories that happen behind closed doors. And he wants people to understand that the golden age of cinema had a very dark shadow. The stars who shaped America's dreams were not always heroes. Some of them, as Howard quietly says, were far from it. As Ron Howard grew older and moved from acting into directing, he began to understand something painful about Hollywood. The industry he loved was not just a place of creativity and dreams, it was also a system built to protect powerful people at any cost. The more famous a star became, the more their bad behavior was ignored. Studios cared about money and image, not about truth or fairness. If an actor could sell tickets and make hit movies, almost anything else could be forgiven. Howard realized that fame acted like a shield. When ordinary people made mistakes, they faced consequences. But in Hollywood, the rules were different. A famous name could turn serious accusations into small rumors. Bad temper was called passion. Cruelty was described as being difficult, and real victims were often pushed aside so that careers could continue without interruption. The public only saw the polished version of stars, never the damage left behind them. During his long career, Howard watched how the system worked. Agents, producers, and studio executives all played their part. If a story threatened a popular actor, it was quietly buried. If a crew member complained about mistreatment, they were told to stay silent or risk losing their job. Hollywood created legends, and once those legends became valuable, the industry did everything possible to protect them. Reputation mattered more than truth. What troubled Howard most was how normal this became. People in the business accepted it as just the way things are. Young actors and filmmakers quickly learned not to question powerful names. Even journalists often looked the other way, afraid of losing access to big stars. Over time, a culture of silence grew stronger and stronger. Everyone knew certain secrets, but almost no one dared to speak them out loud. For Howard, this realization changed the way he looked at the films and actors he once admired. He began to separate talent from character. He understood that a brilliant performance on screen did not mean a person was decent in real life. Some of the most charming and beloved figures in entertainment had very ugly sides that audiences never saw. The more he learned, the more he felt that someone needed to tell the real story. That is why Howard eventually decided to speak openly about the darker side of Hollywood history. Not out of revenge or bitterness, but out of honesty. He wanted people to understand that the golden age was not built only on hard work and creativity. It was also built on fear, power, and silence. And behind many of the smiling faces America loved were secrets that the industry worked very hard to hide. In the 1930s, no one in Hollywood looked more like a hero than Errol Flynn. On screen, he was fearless, handsome, and full of adventure. Movies like Captain Blood and The Adventures of Robin Hood turned him into one of the biggest stars in the world. Audiences saw him as the perfect gentleman, the brave romantic figure who always saved the day. But behind that bright smile, there was a very different man. Flynn arrived in Hollywood from Australia with wild confidence and natural charm. Studios quickly realized he could make millions. They built an entire image around him, selling him as the ultimate leading man. Yet people who worked closely with him soon noticed his darker side. He drank too much, used drugs, and treated many people around him with cold arrogance. Fame came easily to Flynn, and with that fame came a belief that he could do whatever he wanted. By the early 1940s, ugly rumors about his personal life began to spread. In 1942, two teenage girls accused Flynn of serious crimes. The accusations shocked America and filled newspapers for months. Instead of showing fear or shame, Flynn acted as if the whole situation was a joke. He laughed in courtrooms and behaved like a man who knew he would never truly be punished. The studio stood firmly behind him, hiring expensive lawyers and using their power to protect their biggest star. To the public, the trial looked like drama surrounding a misunderstood celebrity. To people inside Hollywood, it showed something much more disturbing. It showed how far the industry was willing to go to defend a profitable name. Witnesses disappeared, stories were changed, and eventually Flynn was cleared of all charges. His career survived, and many fans went back to loving him as if nothing had happened. But the accusations were only part of the story. Over the years, private letters and personal accounts revealed how Flynn really thought about women and about his own behavior. He bragged about his actions and showed little regret. Ron Howard, learning about Flynn later in life, said that reading those stories opened his eyes. He realized that Hollywood had helped protect a man who should have been stopped long before. As the years passed, Flynn's life began to fall apart. His addictions grew worse, his body weakened, and his money disappeared. By the late 1950s, the charming hero looked tired and broken. He died in 1959, at only 50 years old, worn out by the same lifestyle he had once celebrated. Many people remembered him as a tragic figure, but Howard saw something deeper. He saw Flynn as one of the first clear examples of how fame could excuse cruelty. For Ron Howard, Errol Flynn's story became a lesson that he never forgot. Hollywood had turned a deeply flawed man into a legend and ignored the damage he left behind. It proved that a bright smile and a famous name could hide almost anything, and it showed how easily an entire industry could look the other way when too much money was at stake. To the world, Kirk Douglas looked like the definition of strength. His intense eyes, powerful voice, and fearless performances made him one of the greatest actors of his generation. Films like Spartacus turned him into a global icon. Audiences saw a man of honor and courage on screen, a fighter who always stood up for what was right. But behind the cameras, many people experienced a very different side of Kirk Douglas. Douglas grew up poor, the son of immigrant parents, and he fought his way to the top of Hollywood through pure determination. That same determination, however, often turned into something harsh and difficult. Crew members who worked with him described him as demanding and unpredictable. He wanted everything done his way, and when it wasn't, his temper could explode without warning. People on set learned to be careful around him because no one ever knew what might trigger his anger. Actors who worked beside him often felt the pressure too. Some admired his passion, but others felt bullied by it. Douglas didn't just want to perform well, he wanted to control every scene and every moment. Directors and co-stars sometimes found themselves walking on eggshells, afraid of upsetting him. Ron Howard, studying Douglas as a young filmmaker, later said that there was always a kind of tension under his performances, like a man who was never truly at peace. Over the years, darker stories about Douglas also began to follow him. Rumors about his behavior toward women circulated quietly through Hollywood for decades. People talked about how powerful men of that era believed they could take whatever they wanted. Those whispers never turned into official charges, but they never disappeared either. Like so many other powerful stars, Douglas benefited from a system that preferred silence over scandal. Even when directors praised his talent, they admitted he was difficult to handle. The famous filmmaker Stanley Kubrick once called Douglas brilliant but extremely hard to control. On film sets, he could inspire greatness one moment and create fear the next. Hollywood accepted this as simply part of working with a legend. The bigger his name became, the less anyone dared to challenge him. For Ron Howard, Kirk Douglas represented one of the biggest contradictions of classic Hollywood. A man who spoke about justice and dignity on screen, but who often ruled his professional world with intimidation. Howard believed Douglas showed how power can slowly change a person. The more success he gained, the more he seemed to believe that normal rules did not apply to him. When Douglas accepted a Lifetime Achievement Award late in his career, many people saw an old man finally at peace, but Howard looked at it differently. He saw a performer who had spent decades outrunning his own demons. The applause could not erase the stories of fear and anger that followed him. In Howard's eyes, Douglas proved that greatness and cruelty can live side by side. His legacy remains complicated. To film history, he is a giant. To many who worked with him, he was also a man who made Hollywood a harder, colder place. And for Ron Howard, Kirk Douglas became another reminder that talent alone does not make someone a hero. If Errol Flynn showed how charm could hide corruption, and Kirk Douglas showed how power could create fear, then Faye Dunaway revealed another ugly side of Hollywood. She proved that cruelty did not always come with loud anger or violence. Sometimes it came dressed in beauty, elegance, and cold perfection. During the late 1960s and 1970s, Dunaway was considered one of the greatest actresses alive. Movies like Bonnie and Clyde and Chinatown made her a superstar almost overnight. On screen, she looked flawless, confident, and untouchable. Critics praised her talent, and audiences admired her style. To the outside world, she was the image of Hollywood class, but behind the scenes, a very different reputation began to grow. People who worked with Dunaway often described her as extremely difficult. Crew members spoke about her constant demands and her explosive temper. Assistants said she could be charming one moment and cruel the next. Stories spread through the industry about how she treated people beneath her. Many felt that she believed everyone on set existed only to serve her needs. One of the most famous examples came during the filming of Mommy Dearest. The movie was meant to be about the cruelty of actress Joan Crawford, yet many insiders felt that Dunaway behaved almost the same way. Co-stars and crew members later said the atmosphere on set was filled with tension. She shouted at makeup artists, complained endlessly about lighting, and sometimes refused to work until everything was changed to her liking. Directors who worked with her often found themselves exhausted. Some admitted they were afraid to confront her because her reactions were so extreme. There were reports of her throwing objects in anger, humiliating assistants in front of others, and stopping entire productions because of small problems. Instead of being remembered as a brilliant professional, she slowly became known as someone impossible to please. Ron Howard later pointed to Dunaway as an example of how success can turn into emotional cruelty. He believed that her need for control became so strong that she stopped seeing other people as human beings. To her, perfection mattered more than kindness. Over time, that attitude began to destroy her own career. Directors stopped wanting to work with her, and opportunities slowly disappeared. By the 2000s, Dunaway was no longer the powerful star she once was. The industry that had celebrated her talent now avoided her because of her behavior, even when she blamed others for her problems. Most people knew the truth. Hollywood had finally grown tired of her demands and her harsh personality. For Ron Howard, Faye Dunaway's story became a clear warning. Talent can open doors, but cruelty eventually closes them. She chased perfection so hard that she forgot how to treat people with respect. And in the end, her own attitude did more damage to her legacy than any bad film ever could. Howard often said that real power in Hollywood is not about control. It is about grace. Dunaway, in his view, lost sight of that simple truth. And because of it, one of the brightest stars of her era faded into isolation. For generations of Americans, John Wayne was more than an actor. He was a symbol. The brave cowboy, the tough soldier, the man who always stood for honor and country. His deep voice and confident walk made him look like the perfect American hero. But as Ron Howard grew older and learned more about Hollywood, he discovered that the man behind that image was very different from the character on screen. Wayne built his entire career playing strong, fearless men. Movies like The Searchers and True Grit turned him into one of the most powerful figures in film history. Audiences believed he represented everything good about America. Yet people who worked with him often saw another side. On film sets, Wayne could be harsh, intimidating, and controlling. He expected everyone around him to obey without question. Crew members later described how uncomfortable it could be to work near him. If something was not done exactly the way he wanted, he would shout, curse, and embarrass people in front of others. Younger actors were often nervous around him because he did not tolerate disagreement. Ron Howard once said that this kind of environment was not about creativity, it was about fear pretending to be leadership. Wayne's personal beliefs were even more troubling. As the world began to change in the 1960s and 1970s, he refused to change with it. He openly expressed opinions that many people found offensive and outdated. In a famous interview, he made harsh comments about different races and cultures, showing a mindset that belonged to another era. While many stars tried to hide their prejudice, Wayne spoke about it proudly. These attitudes followed him onto movie sets as well. Stories spread about how he treated certain co-stars and crew members with disrespect. He mocked actors who challenged stereotypes and dismissed anyone who questioned his views. To Wayne, progress looked like weakness, and he made that clear to everyone around him. What shocked Ron Howard most was how little this seemed to hurt Wayne's career. No matter what he said or how he behaved, Hollywood continued to celebrate him. Studios kept giving him leading roles, and fans continued to love him. His fame acted like armor, protecting him from criticism that would have destroyed lesser-known actors. Even near the end of his life, Wayne never apologized for anything. He believed completely in his own version of the world. When he died in 1979, he was honored as a national legend. Very few people at the time wanted to talk about the darker parts of his personality. For Howard, John Wayne became one of the clearest examples of how Hollywood can turn a complicated, flawed man into a simple hero. The cowboy image was strong enough to hide years of cruelty and prejudice. It showed that sometimes the myths created by movies are more powerful than the truth. Howard later said that learning about Wayne changed the way he looked at old films forever. He realized that the characters audiences admire are not always reflections of the people who play them. And he understood that power, when mixed with arrogance, can turn even a beloved icon into a bully behind closed doors. Out of all the stories Ron Howard learned about Hollywood, none disturbed him more deeply than the story of Roman Polanski. To many film lovers, Polanski was a genius. His movies were praised as works of art, filled with tension, emotion, and brilliance. Howard himself once admired Polanski's talent as a young filmmaker. But when he discovered the truth about the man behind those films, his admiration turned into shock and anger. Polanski had a tragic and dramatic life long before he became famous. He survived war in Europe and experienced terrible personal loss. When he came to Hollywood, his creativity quickly made him one of the most respected directors in the world. Movies like Rosemary's Baby proved that he had a rare gift for storytelling. Critics called him visionary. Studios treated him like gold. Then, in 1977, everything changed. Polanski was arrested for a serious crime involving a 13-year-old girl. The details were clear and deeply disturbing. He admitted his guilt in court, and the case became one of the biggest scandals in Hollywood history. Many people believed he would finally face real punishment. Instead, something very familiar happened. The same system that had protected powerful men for decades began to protect him as well. Before his final sentencing, Polanski fled the United States and escaped to Europe. From there, he continued to make movies and live comfortably, avoiding justice. Hollywood reacted in a way that deeply disappointed Ron Howard. Instead of standing firmly with the victim, many famous actors and directors defended Polanski, calling him a misunderstood artist. To Howard, this reaction revealed the darkest side of the industry. He realized that for some people in Hollywood, talent mattered more than morality. Awards, money, and reputation were treated as more important than the pain of a young girl. When Polanski later won major film awards, including an Oscar, Howard refused to celebrate. He felt that applauding him sent a terrible message to the world. Over the years, more and more people began to question why Polanski was still treated like a hero. Protests followed him at film festivals, and his name became a symbol of Hollywood hypocrisy. Yet he remained free, protected by countries that would not send him back to face punishment. For Ron Howard, Polanski's story represented everything wrong with the old Hollywood mindset. It showed how easily fame could erase guilt and how quickly powerful people could rewrite their own history. Howard believed that no amount of artistic success should excuse real harm done to others. Even decades later, the case continues to divide opinions. But Howard's view has never changed. He often said that the industry's willingness to separate art from behavior was deeply dangerous. To him, Polanski was proof that brilliance does not make a person good and that talent should never be used as an excuse for cruelty. In Howard's eyes, Roman Polanski became the ultimate example of a system that cared more about protecting legends than protecting the innocent. And that realization stayed with him for the rest of his career. For many Americans, Mickey Rooney was the face of happiness. From the 1930s onward, he appeared in dozens of cheerful musicals and family films. He was small, energetic, funny, and full of life. Audiences loved him. To millions of people, he represented the bright and innocent side of Hollywood. But Ron Howard later learned that behind that famous smile was a very troubled and difficult man. Rooney became a superstar while he was still a child. By his teenage years, he was already one of the highest-paid actors in the world. Fame came to him so early that he never really had a normal life. Studios controlled everything around him, and he quickly got used to being treated like royalty. That kind of attention changed him. People who worked with Rooney as an adult often said he had a huge ego and a very small amount of patience. Although he made the world laugh on screen, his personal life was filled with chaos. Rooney married many times, and his relationships almost always ended badly. Former wives and co-stars described him as selfish, moody, and hard to live with. Even his close friend Judy Garland, who worked beside him for years, admitted that he could be kind one moment and cruel the next. As his career went on, Rooney struggled with money problems, addictions, and constant drama. The joyful boy audiences remembered slowly turned into a bitter man. Directors who hired him later in life sometimes found him difficult and unpredictable. The same charm that had made him famous now felt forced and tired. One of the saddest parts of Rooney's story came near the end of his life. In his old age, he was involved in public scandals about family conflict and financial abuse. Court records showed that he had been mistreated and controlled by people close to him. Many felt that the Hollywood system had used him up and then left him alone when he was no longer valuable. When Mickey Rooney died in 2014 at the age of 93, the public mostly remembered the happy films and the lively performances, but Ron Howard saw something else when he looked at Rooney's life. He saw a man who had been shaped and damaged by fame from a very young age, a man who learned to perform happiness while feeling deeply unhappy inside. For Howard, Rooney became another example of how the golden age of Hollywood created illusions. The industry sold him to the world as a symbol of joy, but it never cared about protecting the real person behind that image. His life showed how applause and laughter can hide loneliness and pain. Howard often said that Rooney's story was one of the saddest in Hollywood history, not because he was a villain like some others, but because he was a product of a system that cared more about profit than people. In the end, the smiling legend died almost forgotten, proving that fame does not guarantee respect, peace, or happiness. To Howard, Mickey Rooney represented the final proof that the golden age was not golden at all. It was a world of bright lights that often left very dark shadows behind. After learning about so many different stars and scandals, Ron Howard slowly began to see something larger than individual stories. Errol Flynn, Kirk Douglas, Faye Dunaway, John Wayne, Roman Polanski, Mickey Rooney, all of them were very different people. They came from different generations and worked in different kinds of movies. Yet their stories all shared one important thing: Hollywood protected them. Howard realized that what he was seeing was not just a collection of bad personalities. It was a system built to keep powerful people safe no matter what they did. If a famous actor behaved badly, the studio called it stress. If someone was cruel, they called it passion. If a serious accusation appeared, lawyers and publicists stepped in to make it disappear. Money and fame always came first. The people who suffered most were usually the ones with the least power. Assistants, crew members, young actors, and victims had almost no voice. Many were afraid to complain because they needed their jobs. Others knew that no one would believe them against a big star. Over and over again, the same pattern repeated. The powerful were forgiven, and the powerless were ignored. Howard saw how the media also played a role. Magazines and newspapers preferred to print glamorous stories instead of ugly truths. Fans wanted to believe in their heroes, so they looked away from rumors and scandals. Even other actors stayed quiet, afraid that speaking out would hurt their own careers. Silence became part of the culture. What hurt Howard the most was realizing how normal all of this had become. Cruel behavior was treated like just another part of show business. People said, "That's just how Hollywood is," as if that made everything acceptable. Over time, generations of artists grew up believing that talent gave someone the right to act however they wanted. Looking back, Howard understood that the golden age was built on more than great films. It was built on fear, control, and protection of the famous. Many wonderful movies were made, but behind them were stories that audiences never heard. He believed that if the truth had been faced earlier, Hollywood could have become a kinder and more honest place. By speaking about these things, Howard hoped to change how people looked at film history. He did not want to destroy the past, but he wanted it to be seen clearly. He wanted younger generations to understand that success should never excuse cruelty and that talent does not make someone above the law. For Howard, the biggest lesson was simple. Hollywood was not just a dream factory. It was also a mirror of society's worst habits. When power goes unchecked, it often hurts others. And when silence becomes normal, the truth slowly disappears. This understanding prepared him for the final conclusion he would reach about the industry he had loved all his life. A conclusion that would shape the way he looked at fame, art, and responsibility forever. After decades in Hollywood, Ron Howard reached a simple but painful conclusion. The golden age of movies was not built only on talent and creativity. It was also built on silence, fear, and protection of powerful people. As a young boy, he had believed that the stars he saw on screen were heroes in real life. As an adult, he learned that many of them were deeply flawed human beings, and some were much worse than that. Looking back on everything he witnessed and studied, Howard understood that fame can be a dangerous thing. It gives people influence, admiration, and often complete freedom from consequences. In Hollywood, a big name could erase almost any mistake. The industry cared more about protecting its legends than protecting ordinary people. That truth changed the way Howard saw the world of entertainment forever. He did not speak about these things out of anger. He spoke about them because he believed honesty mattered. Howard loved movies and respected the art of filmmaking. But he also believed that the public deserved to know that talent does not automatically mean goodness. A beautiful performance on screen does not guarantee a beautiful soul behind it. Each of the stories he learned carried the same warning. Errol Flynn showed how charm could hide cruelty. Kirk Douglas proved that power could turn into fear. Faye Dunaway revealed how ego could destroy compassion. John Wayne demonstrated how a hero image could mask prejudice. Roman Polanski became the darkest example of how Hollywood sometimes defended the indefensible. And Mickey Rooney showed how fame could use a person up and leave them broken. Together, those stories formed a bigger truth. Hollywood created dreams, but it also created illusions. It taught audiences to admire people they did not truly know. It rewarded success and ignored suffering. For many years, the industry preferred to celebrate legends instead of questioning them. Howard hoped that by talking openly, things could slowly change. He believed that a new generation of filmmakers could learn from the mistakes of the past. Respect, kindness, and responsibility should matter as much as awards and box office numbers. Real greatness, in his view, was not just about making good movies. It was about treating people well while making them. In the end, Ron Howard did not want to destroy anyone's memories of classic films. He simply wanted people to see them with clearer eyes, to understand that the spotlight can hide as much as it reveals, and to remember that behind every famous face is a real human being, capable of both good and bad. Hollywood, he often said, is very good at telling stories, but it is not always good at telling the truth. The final lesson he carried from a lifetime in the industry was this: the scariest monsters are not in horror movies. They are the ones who smile for the camera while no one is watching. So now, the question is yours. Which of these stories shocked you the most? Did they change the way you see Hollywood's so-called golden age? Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and if you want more deep dives into the hid,